to another episode of Boardroom Reflections and Stuck2Strong podcast. Today we have a remote sensing analyst who works with an organization, an NGO by the name of Acres of Ice from Ladakh, India. Karuna Mira Sah is a 30-year-old glaciologist who grew up in Nainital in the Uttarakhand Himalayas that shaped her love for mountains. Raised in a family of mountaineers, her father used to conduct treks and used to was an avid mountaineer, and she got passionate about the role of glaciers in mountain communities. And out of that, she entered a course in earth sciences, followed by a geosensing course from Stockholm University, and now is doing her master's in science communication at the University of Otago, and eventually hopes to go into a PhD program in glaciology. She is yet to figure out where. So today she comes from Ladakh after an extensive trip in Europe where she presented some of her data at a European conference. And we talk about the pressing problems of retreating glaciers and the growing desperation of high altitude villagers in water poor areas that exist within the rain shadow of the Himalayan mountains, and how these innovative techniques of ice stupas and ice reservoirs created by spraying water and increasing the surface area and freezing them in blocks of ice preserve water for these subsistence communities to survive the lean months and provide snow melt and ice melt water for irrigation. So with that, let us begin our exploration on Boardroom Reflections into the future of the world as seen from the future generation that is now taking on the torch of going forward. Karuna Mira Sah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm currently working as a climate practitioner in Ladakh in India. So this is in the Trans-Himalayan region where there is very little precipitation compared to other parts of the Himalayan region. And so on average, we are getting less than 100 millimeters of rainfall a year. And the entirety of Ladakh, a majority of it is dependent on the cryosphere for survival. So glaciers are directly contributing to water availability for agricultural use here. So if as glaciers are retreating and there's a lack of snowfall, it impacts agricultural productivity because there's only one crop cycle that these villagers get, because in the winter nothing grows here. So if they
So,
don't sow in April, they will not have a crop by October.
so my question is, you did say
Mhm.
there is less than 100 millimeters of precipitation, but
Mhm.
then where is the snow coming from if there's no precipitation?
It's very little precipitation, but it's very high altitude, so it gets cold. So anything um
So there
that
is precipitation in the form of snow.
but yes, but again, not in the way you think of in Uttarakhand Himalaya, for example. That's like a lot of snow there. It's very different here still, even though there is that winter snowfall.
So,
Generally, just overall precipitation is still lower than other parts of the Himalayan region.
okay. And
Yeah,
is that due to the
just the
region
location.
eh, being in a rain shadow of some mountain, or is that the reason
Yeah,
for it?
yeah, Himalayan rain shadow.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but on
Mm.
average, we are also around 3,000 meters of elevation. Like it starts from around 2,500 meters and goes up to 7,000 meters um, of elevation. So we are very high altitude. So it does get extremely cold, and there is winter precipitation, but it's that winter precipitation that's becoming more and more inconsistent. And so villagers are having to rely on adaptation techniques to kind of cope with that changing climate.
So
And so I'm
what got you
Mhm.
interested in this area?
So my father is a mountaineer and he used to take people to the higher altitudes. And so I grew up hearing stories about glaciers retreating and treks getting longer and longer as glaciers were retreating. And that got me interested in wanting to study the natural environment and eventually ended up studying earth sciences and then doing a master's in this field and now working here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how do you map this area? You are a remote sensing analyst, so
Mhm.
how do you do the mapping?
So depends on what kind of mapping you're talking about. If you mean glaciers, then you can look at satellite images that are taken by um, satellites like Landsat, um, that is hosted by NASA, or Sentinel, that's hosted by the European Space Agency, and those that data is freely available for use. So then you look at the satellite imagery and see where the glaciers are and delineate them. And so you can see over time, as the satellites are taking more and more images year after year, how they're changing in and retreating.
So what if on a given project starting
Hmm.
from April till September,
Hmm.
how do you divide your time and tasks like that? Give me a feel for how your
Hmm.
life evolves.
So during the summer months, the villagers are very busy because everyone is involved in agricultural activity. And during that time, we go and survey villages to make sure, talk to villagers, talk to them about how their water needs are being met for the year, whether they're having any issues with water availability, whether they've noticed changes in water availability or a lack of water or any sort of discrepancy related to water. And then go above into the mountains and then try to find sources of spring, um, and then see how much water is available there, and then talk to the village head to see if it is possible to construct ice reservoirs as a nature inspired climate adaptation solution for supplementing their spring water usage. And so it's and during the summer it's a lot of field reconnaissance work.
And then how do you construct these ice reservoirs?
So the ice reservoirs are constructed. It's a very simple gravity fed method. So you are taking water from a higher altitude through pipelines and then spraying it out in a lower altitude. So the technique itself is just completely gravity fed. There is no additional power sources needed. But what the startup that I'm working with has done is that they've automated the construction of this process. So there are there are sensors in the pipelines, there are weather stations involved, and based on the data that they get from ambient temperature, water temperature, and such, it makes a decision autonomously on whether or not it should spray. And so originally you used to have to sit up close to where the ice structure was being built, manually make sure that there is a pipeline that is taking water downstream and spraying it out. Um,
And when you say
every
spray,
night,
you
mhm, just
spray
a
it out
fountain
in fountain, but where does that sprayed water that will just flow
just goes
away?
out. Yeah,
But
it
does
doesn't flow, it freezes in the
it
winter.
freezes? So
Yeah,
it freezes into an ice structure,
yes, like a conical shape.
and in this form, th- these ice cones are
Hmm.
become stores of of r- water available to them
Yes.
in the warm months.
Yes, exactly. So it's just a repository, it's just a water storage technique. So you're just storing winter water that would otherwise not be used for any other purpose and would just flow into the Indus away, into an ice reservoir that can be used to supplement spring water use,
And you're
specifically.
freezing it by increasing the surface area by spraying.
Yes.
And
Yes.
by increasing that surface area, it actually freezes. And
Yes.
in the frozen form, it remains frozen. It doesn't melt again because the ambient
Mhm.
temperature is such that it
Is
maintains it.
exactly. It
And now,
starts melting about in end of March, April, and
and
that's
then,
when water
and the
need what is needed
and
more.
and the rate of melt is
Mm-hmm.
like a spring water freshwater melt or snow melt that
Mm-hmm.
feeds through natural rivulets
Yeah.
down to the agricultural fields below.
Mm-hmm. So we built on pre-existing streams, so all the water that melts goes back into the stream from which it came.
And these streams are then diverted into the fields out there where they have the
Yes.
agricultural need. All
Yes,
right.
so that distribution of the water is completely dependent on the villagers themselves, and they are the ones who manage that part. We are not involved in the distribution. We just are ensuring that there is enough water in the stream
So the
available in the
villages,
first place.
the local villages, administrative and decision structure, and
Mm-hmm.
the villagers' political framework
Mm-hmm.
decides how they are
Mm-hmm.
going to distribute that water equitably towards their needs. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And so the canal system that is being built in a lot of these villages have been going on for centuries. So, um, people have an idea of like how to manage and make sure that the water is being distributed equitably through a indigenous system called the churpon system. So there's one person or one family involved in making sure that everyone gets an equitable share.
A sarpanch is there who does that.
Not a sarpanch, this is churpon, which literally means like a lord of like the water.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Some kind of administrative uh,
Yes.
political structure is there.
Yeah, village elected. Yeah.
Village elected political structure is there
Yeah. Yeah.
that assures equitable
Hmm.
distribution of a vital resource.
Exactly.
Okay, and then, so what are the greatest hurdles that you face in creating these acres of ice uh, structures? What are the biggest hurdles that you have?
I think the biggest hurdle for sure is the amount of field work that kind of goes into it, because it's very difficult to find sources of spring water in the mountains. So without field reconnaissance, that part becomes really, really difficult. Um, but more from like a political perspective as well, a lot of um, like for example, the government is very involved in wanting to fund these projects for making it scalable throughout Ladakh. But then maintenance and making sure that it is going on year after year, the funding is not always consistent. So that has been the biggest challenge in Ladakh. I think that even previously, all the people who have been wanting to work in adaptation, they get an initial funding for a pilot, but then don't get further consecutive funding for maintenance. And it's the maintenance part of it and making sure that the structure is viable to be able to like function year after year. That becomes a problem without funding.
Who are your
So
funding sources?
the government, the local government funds a bunch of these ice reservoirs. We have developmental agencies like GIZ involved. The UN is involved. So, yeah, multiple international development organizations, but a majority of it is the government, local government.
Hmm. If you had a magic wand,
Hmm.
what would you wish for most?
If I had a magic wand, what I wish for most would be um, reduction of greenhouse emission just worldwide, because people here are having to face consequences of um, decisions and actions that they have not taken. Um, and so climate change is impacting here in such a drastic way, and it's really hard to adaptation is just kind of like a band-aid on the situation. It's not a full solution, because if the water actually just disappears, then there's no way of adapting or coping with it. There will be out migration, there will be desertification, um, and there will be loss of culture and livelihood and all of these things. So the magic wand would have to be just global emission curbs, to make sure that we are on a path where glaciers are being preserved, water is being preserved. Um, yeah.
With the acceleration of AI and huge data centers,
Mm-hmm.
the carbon footprint of AI is extremely huge. You
Mm-hmm.
realize that
Mm-hmm.
uh, its power consumption of AI is huge,
Yeah.
is incredibly huge,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's likely to become worse. Only it's not
Yes.
going to become less. So
Mm-hmm.
that being the case, the situation for global warming is no longer carbon emission by the automobile industry. It is the emissions that are being used by the rest of the energy infrastructure.
Yeah. Yes, of course. When I say emissions, I mean kind of
Yeah,
like all inclusive,
yeah, yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
just greenhouse emissions. Yeah.
yeah. Um, where do you see your work in beyond uh, enabling subsistence farming and the survival of villages and their livelihood? Where do you see
Mm-hmm.
your work leading to in terms of um, you know hydro, high altitude hydrology and
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing right now? Where do you see that going?
Um, where I see that going is hopefully more international collaboration and more work through collaboration to science diplomacy, and hopefully there is some inaction of policy change, or some sort of large scale systemic change when it comes to um, climate change and climate emissions, because uh, as we're seeing more and more politically, that's going further and further back in priority lists. And water is a big concern, because right now we have several estimates that the world is going through something called the global water bankruptcy, which means that a lot of people do not have access to potable water. And I think there was a study by the UN, a report which said that 2.2 billion people still lack water and drinking services. And all of that is coming from, a lot of it is coming from mountain regions, from the monsoons, from um, large scale precipitation, and all of those changes are going to cause bigger and more bigger issues for people living downstream. So, I mean, 2 billion people are already just dependent on the Himalayan Hindu Kush mountain system for water needs. We're not even counting the rest of the world. And um, here it's already becoming an issue. So many cities within India is having issues with water availability during the summer. There's not enough, it's either too much water, which becomes really hard to do like water harvesting techniques. There's like too much water that disappears because of urban structures that is not utilized. So there needs like big systemic infrastructure changes through policy. And I think the work being done here can be like part of that policy change, because there is a lot of scope for international collaboration in mountain regions, and of course the rest of India as well. And there is a lot of potential. It's just we are not there yet.
Hmm. W- Once this project is over, where are you intending to go? What's your next step after this project?
My next steps is wanting to do a PhD in glaciology.
When
And
where are you planning to go do that?
not sure yet. I will hopefully be applying for positions and seeing where it ends up being. But hopefully, with, again, like I said, international collaboration, but working in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. So I will want to work in India as much as possible.
Have you considered the Andean plateau? Because the Andean cultures have evolved some very innovative water harvesting techniques
Mm-hmm.
to uh, to succeed in relatively water poor environments.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, there's a lot of water related projects happening across the mountain regions around the world. And a lot of those projects work specifically in the locality in which they are working. So even with the Ice Reservoir project, for example, we are going to pilot two new projects in Kyrgyzstan this year, and one in Nepal to see the viability of scalability of the project. Um, the the Ice Stupa project, which was the predecessor from which we have we iterated and integrated data into, has worked and is continuing to work right now already in the Andes as well. So it's really interesting seeing these indigenous techniques kind of go out from even Ladakh and go into other parts of the world and see if it's viable to build those structures there as well. So it's really interesting to see, and maybe there is ways of trying to pilot a project from the Andean mountains in the Himalaya and see if it's viable here. But again, that requires more international collaboration, like I said.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, in our private conversations, I mentioned that you should actually take your project out and give a TED talk on this. This is quite a
Hmm.
bit of you actually accumulate quite a bit uh, of valuable data that can be presented. Have you thought
Hmm.
of that? Have you thought of that?
Um, it's it's one of those things where the the talk itself will has been, so Sonam Wangchuk, who is the predecessor of this project, from whom we have iterated on this idea, and the mentor of our founders as well, has spoken about this topic extensively at TED platforms as well. And this is not something that, like, I am only a small, tiny part of this larger conversation. So I feel like for a TED platform, don't have anything to contribute in the sense that there's um there's a lot of there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get it to a story where it is meaningful across like multiple decades of work that's already come before it. So that work has already been talked about multiple times, so I don't know what new things I would be contributing in the TED platform, which is why I'm also
It's not necessarily new.
conflicted on it.
It's not necessarily new.
Yeah.
It's more importantly a reiteration of an established idea, but something that has not yet resonated in the public consciousness. So uh,
Right, but then I'm also not the founder of the startup, right? I'm also not the person. I'm
you
just
don't
one
have to be a
person
founder.
working in this.
You don't
But
have to be a founder. You can be a glaciologist talking about something that is important to you.
yeah, I guess, but I don't know. I don't think that there's anything at the moment to contribute meaningfully towards the story. It's
Okay.
it's just patches of a story right now. I can see it being something bigger, hopefully in the future, but like right now there seems to be not too much new information that I can potentially contribute towards like a TED platform, is what I feel.
I wager that your view about it is skewed.
Maybe.
Anyway, it's okay. Uh, it's really fascinating what I see you do and what I hear from
Hmm.
in the words you speak. Uh, Water is. a growing problem not just in the high altitude but also in the places like in the Middle East and in
Mm-hmm.
where water is being reclaimed from the sea through desalination
Mm-hmm.
projects.
Yeah.
And in places like UAE and Iran, Iraq, and
Mm-hmm.
Saudi Arabia, they have extensive financial resources to invest
Mm-hmm.
in cost-heavy desalination
Mm-hmm.
to to create water for their populations.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it may be interesting to see if the the heavy oil-rich regions of the Middle East would see their future being more well tied by investing in mountain research, even
Mm-hmm.
though those are regions not part of their ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Because what impacts the mountains impacts the desert. And it may be interesting for to see if you can present some of your ideas in the Middle East Forum
Mm-hmm.
and request them to invest more in the kind of work that you do.
I think they're definitely interested in it from like the agricultural perspective
Hmm.
because um and that
Because
makes sense to me, but yeah, water
desertification is a common problem.
ex- exactly, exactly. But I've also noticed that um water as a resource is not talked about as much as it should be by corporations when they're talking about climate change. It's something that's always again on the back burner. It's not talking about emissions, talking about waste, talking about other aspects of climate change is always in the forefront, but talking about water as a whole is not, and water is linked to a lot of water is linked to everything. Um, but it's not the priority of a lot of these larger companies and organizations and associations. So it becomes a priority when it comes to drinking water. But in a lot of these places, there is water enough for drinking. It's like problem with usage of water for everything else, for sustenance, for agriculture. That becomes a bigger issue that is not talked about as much. Um, and so I have noticed that a bit when talking about water with people who have climate change agendas on their mind, but water is not something that is like the top of the priority list ever.
So, if you were to make a priority list for discussion,
Mm-hmm.
how would you include water into that framework?
Um, I mean, the AI question is a big one, right? How much water is a company even using given the amount of AI they're using, right? For example, larger companies like Nvidia and bigger tech companies, I wonder how much their water consumption is just based off of the amount of data centers that they would be building, how much AI is being utilized within the company itself, even for training, because that's something that rarely gets talked about is the amount of water that even went into the training data to begin with, not just um, the ramifications of once an AI agent has been built, how much water is being used per query afterwards. So, I mean, companies are not talking about that part of like how much water is consumed um, from that perspective. It's not something that's necessarily studied, probably either. But
No,
I'm not sure.
it's lost.
Yeah,
It's lost data.
exactly.
It's not in the forefront of what is being measured.
Exactly. So, I mean, it would be really interesting to know. Um,
Okay. Any closing thoughts?
um, I think it's just an important topic to consider, especially given in the current political climate as well, of just how much water is being used, how much you are using it. And I know the onus always comes towards the individual, but I definitely feel like large systemic changes need to happen for a for something tangible to be done within the climate change sphere, because um, yes, there is a lot that can be done individually, but I feel like there is a lot more that needs to be done globally through changes um, that the government does, that the larger corporations do, and it's like we've already seen action happen when greenhouse. I mean, for example, when chlorofluorocarbons were creating the ozone hole, the world did come together and they banned CFCs, and the ozone is already in the middle of its repair, and things are getting better than they were back in
Yeah.
the 90s.
Yes.
So it is possible. Everything is possible. It's just a matter of um, the
Finding the
want to do
collective
it
will. Yeah.
and the collective will. Yeah.
So my question is, my question to you is this:
Mm-hmm.
that when you are when you are trying to combine your local work with advocacy
Mm-hmm.
for example, high altitude hydrology and high altitude glacial research,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how are you? How do you balance your work in that? D- are you able to devote any significant time towards advocacy?
Advocacy is a hard one to do because science diplomacy is something that I feel like science communication and science diplomacy need to be taught to every scientist. They don't need to use it. Not every scientist needs to be like a master at doing it, or everybody needs to do it, but everybody should still know of it. And there's a big disconnect right now with climate science researchers and using that research for enacting change through policy or through diplomacy. And I am just still very early in the career of even understanding how I can use my voice against um, to even enact policy changes within India. I have absolutely no clue how that would work. So I'm also very, very early in those steps
You'll be
and learning now.
surprised how easy it is for a voice of one to actually make an impact.
Yes, but I have yet to see
Yeah,
anything happen,
it'll
even though
happen.
there are voices talking about different things and we are
Yeah,
talking to the right people. But yeah,
it
large
happens.
large scale things happen very slowly.
Sometimes it happens faster than you think. We'll see.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
the the other thing that the other thing I wanted to actually explore a little bit in our conversation is how big is your team
We are now almost 16 people, I think.
and who are the most effective science diplomats in your team?
Um, I would say right now the most effective people are the ones that the locals who understand the science and are willing to communicate it to the other locals through their own language and do it best. Being able to juggle multiple people in the community, but then also people in the government through their own local language. I think they are doing a really good job at being able to translate the science to the general audience.
Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
And if you were to take the story out of the Leh Ladakh area,
Hmm.
where would your next step be in terms of taking the message of high altitude water conservation?
Hmm. So that is already happening slowly. Is um we have been talking with the UN. The FAO has a subsidiary called the Mountain Partnership Secretariat that works in mountain regions across the world, and so they are covering the story and are interested in seeing where this goes. We have other intergovernmental organizations like ISIMOD that work out of Nepal that are also interested in such stories. So there are um, those the story is already out there in places where it needs to be, and more people are becoming more aware. So we recently got funding from a large fintech called Klarna, based out of Sweden, and so we were able to then um, interact with their stakeholders as well, through getting funding from them, and are going to be representing the work that's happening in Ladakh at the London Climate Week, that's happening next week as well. So yeah, I think like it's already going out to the platforms that it needs to go to.
With that, Karuna Mira Sah.
Thank you.
Yep.